All right, family. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's having a great day. Uh, it's another end of another week, and so I just hope, pray, and bless that everybody had a great week. And so, welcome again to another episode of Coffee Call. We have a great speaker today. We have a great person on, my brother. He does a lot of stuff in the community. Great brother of Christ. And he does wonderful things. So I just can't wait to hear him. And with these conversations, all we're trying to do is talk to people, have a little kingdom conversation on how we can continue to be unified in the name of Jesus, spreading the gospel in different ways, right? Whether that's through art, through music, through preaching, teaching, conversation, and showing what it means to be the kingdom with diversity, people of different backgrounds, tradition, and cultures. And so thank you guys for tuning in. So I got my brother Ritchie Kong here this morning. And as we bring him on, just continue to pray that this conversation will be led by the Spirit. So I'm going to bring Ritchie Kong on, and we're going to get going on another episode of Coffee Call. Here we go. What's going on, brother? How you doing, man?
I am doing great. Thank you for waking me up this morning to have this conversation. It's
That's
always
right.
great to see you, and hopefully everyone can hear this conversation and learn a little bit, from whatever I can teach.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have much to offer, but I'm excited.
Hey, as long as you're offering your heart, I'm with it. I'm with it.
Sure.
And so, again, thanks for coming on this morning. It's 9:30 Pacific Standard Time. When I first asked Rich if he can do this interview with me, I said it's 9:30 in the morning. He's like, brother, it is early, but I will be on. So I appreciate that. So if you can tell our listeners a little bit background about yourself and what you do as far as ministry wise, or where you at in your life right now, that'll be awesome.
So for me, whenever someone sees me, they always identify me as someone who is creative. And sometimes it's hard to be seen that way because, there's so many things that you can do, and to have like a name tied to who you are, it feels a bit limiting. But, over the years, I embraced it. I realized that this is something that is very much needed, especially in the churches. Being a kid who grew up in an urban community, like, I want to say the ghettos, that just sounds bad, but yeah, in the ghettos, I've always seen, graffiti art and street art around the streets. So I would mimic a lot of the pieces, from the books that I read, or from the pieces that I saw on the walls, and when I became a believer in my early, maybe late high school years, I started to bring that same kind of element into the church settings. And that time, it wasn't really accepted at all. Like, the churches were like, "What is this? Like, is this like some kind of gang thing that you're doing?" If all my friends who grew up the same way that I did, relate. So we continued to do that regardless. And there's times where you just kind of lost hope because not even just graffiti art, but just art in general, like
Right.
visual fine arts, like it wasn't very revered as a form of worship. So when you see worshipers worshiping on stage, I was like, oh, this is what church is. This is what art is. But a lot of these pastors and a lot of these people who are high up in the churches didn't really see that this is our form of worship. This is how we express. This is a gift that God has given us to emanates from us. It's like, if God created us to create, and this is our creativity, how is that not our worship?
That's right. That's good.
So I think with anything that is coming from the Spirit, like these imaginative thoughts, these things that you can't even explain yourself because it comes from God,
Right.
And they may look strange to most people, and I don't think graffiti art in general was even designed for the general public. When it was started in the 80s, it was actually for the other street artists and other graffiti artists. If you ever watch, I don't remember what documentary, I think it was Wild Style. when we did graffiti art, it was to show off for each other because it was a
Mm,
culture within itself, you know. And I think that's a beautiful part. This is how these cultures start: is that there's a specific art that people share that brings people together, you know.
mm,
So that's, you know, that's just something that I've always tried to do throughout my, you know, last couple years, is to find these little hubs, these little you know, these havens, you know, I'd say that I can create for people who aren't feeling accepted to be in the same space, you know, and understand that this is who we are and this is what we create. So, with that being said, you know, I think that's just how my life progressed um, as an artist. You know, it's like really finding purpose in things that you make. So, understanding, of course, we have that the true purpose, which is, you know, bringing people to know who, you know, Christ is,
amen.
and and then, you know, another purpose is, you know, obviously having that commonality of what we can do together, you know. So it's always unifying the body, you know, everywhere you go. um and you know, of course, you know, like I said, I had my ups and downs, but now that the churches have been evolving, you
Mm,
know, and now that you know, these art forms are being more accepted, it's like they want this now, and it's so interesting how it's like, oh well, we don't want you, and that's like, oh, you have something great to bring to the community, and we need your art. And I think that's how you know, a lot of the congregation needs to understand, even to this day, even though it has been accepting and it has been um you know, like it evolved, but at the same time, it's still not really understood, you know.
yeah, yeah. Especially, you know, being Asian American and in the arts, that's
Right.
already so something that's different. And the only arts that I think that they link us with is martial arts. Uh, you know, I'm a father of two, and I just had to bust that joke out. I was waiting for when I
Sure.
can say that.
You can't do that when I'm like mid drinking my
I
coffee, man.
know.
I'm like, you know,
That's
I was
good. Yeah. So
dying
yeah, especially being Asian American and
for sure.
being in the arts, and I know exactly how that feels, man. Growing up Asian American in like you said, ghetto, urban, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
surrounded by people that does different things. And you know, me being in sports, that's not normal either, right? Asian kids
Right.
being in sports and playing football and all that stuff. And but it seems like you said, the church is evolving, and they want more creativity
Hmm.
because people aren't, you know, they're kind of tired with the same old, you know. And so bringing these type of different type of creativity that God has given us, right? It's not like we found it somewhere. No, I believe that God has given each and every one of us a calling of creativity, of imagination. And if we believe in what the scripture says, all wisdom and knowledge is given by our Father.
Hmm.
It's creativity, especially, is part of it. And so I think the church is creating space for that, and especially because now we have young ethnic leaders that are from different types of communities
Right.
exploring these things. It's a little bit easier. And so how are you using for right now, like what are you doing with your art at this moment? Are you teaching or
I'm doing whatever I can.
Mm,
You know, I think as soon as COVID hits, you know, a lot of our plans have been reverted to something that we obviously didn't plan.
right?
And you know, it's like your agendas have been taken away, so you can't necessarily foretell exactly what the future holds. and
Mm.
and now it's like, you know, doing murals and installations, and that's what I mainly do. I'm an experience designer, by the way. I'm not sure if anyone knows, but
What did you say you were?
experience designer.
What is an experienced designer?
So it's like creating experiences for different settings, you know. So
Mm,
say if like Canon camera wants, you know, like the company I work for built like a, you know, something for one of their trade shows or their conferences, we would go out and make that. So it's like, oh, we want like a giant camera with like that shoots out little like balls into a ball pit, you know.
oh, okay.
So it's a lot of like interactivity. You know, I did one for Demi Lovato a couple years ago
Wow.
in Chicago. So it's like she
Yeah.
wanted like it was like a museum, and she created this space where like it's a tattoo parlor with all her tattoos on the wall. So we painted the walls according to the tattoo she has on her body, and then you sit down and someone airbrushes her struggles on you. So
Wow.
yeah, it's really interesting. And then ironically, that same year she OD'd. So it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
tough, it really shows how human we are,
Right.
and but that's what I love about, experience design, is that you create a space where you take someone to an experience, and that's what
Right.
it is. Yeah.
Right. That's super cool. And I know you did stuff for like I think Coachella at one point. I saw some art
Yeah,
you
I
did.
do that every year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I paint this year? I paint. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I think because it's like an uprise of Asians in the industry,
Right.
and this year was like one of the first year that had a lot of featured Asian artists. And
Hmm.
for myself, it's like I never get to express that side of myself. It's like I always
Mm,
kind of had to tie into the things that people want me to do as a commercial artist,
mhm.
and I think that's what I do good at. Well, is serving as a designer, and it's hard for me to think as an artist first. I always think as a designer first,
Right.
of catering to what the clients need, So it's like constantly asking questions and seeing, really analyzing and studying culture,
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, we have, I don't even remember the artist's name. See, that shows you how much I don't even know about my own culture. It's not really my culture. This is more
Yeah.
just Asian culture.
Right.
But like, was it 55 Rising, that one whole Asian group with Rich Brian and
Right. Right. Right.
and all the Korean pop bands that I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, and I'm slowly and surely, like, it's not really my like my go-to music. It's really not my music.
Mhm.
But it's really cool just to embrace, hey, like, like, this is who I am, and I want to showcase this.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think it's important to continue to identify as community wherever community that you are, and so yeah, again, I think our stories are similar because as you said that Asian, maybe the Asian American is not your go-to community. For sure it wasn't mine either, and
Yeah,
so but obviously when we walk out the door we can't help it, right?
right. I mean,
The world
it's
continues to look at people in certain ways, and so
right.
if race is one way or ethnicity is one way, I don't think we should shy away from it, but actually use it. And I think that's what you're doing. You're using it to bring people together. And these venues that you're doing art in, they're not necessarily Christian, from what I'm hearing too.
No, we're not.
So you being a believer in this, and
Right.
it's very hard for arts and music because usually in the arts and music area, it's very eclectic. You get all these
Very
different
liberal.
types of very yeah. So you
Yeah.
got all these different types of experiences and communities, but as a believer, it seems like you can go in and navigate through that and continue to shine the light of Christ wherever you are without, uh, you know, bluntly saying like putting it out somebody's throat, right? Or putting it in their face. So
Mhm.
that's awesome that you can do that. Do you have any experience where maybe you had to, you're able to spread the light a little bit in those places and kind of minister or evangelize or through your art or anything like
Oh, I
that?
think every time.
Mm,
I mean, it's, as a believer, it's inevitable to kind of speak about, your faith. I think the times that I feel like I can do it the most is when I'm doing productions. When I say productions, there's a term in graffiti art term, is when you paint with other artists to do one big
right.
piece. It's a production. So when you create these productions, my team, which is Iron Sharpens Iron. Shout out to ISI.
Mhm.
Yeah, ISI crew. We have to communicate. We have to talk to each other. And for me, the part that I find the most important is actually not the art itself. It's
Mm,
actually making those connections with the public. So those are the times where I get to really interact. And even when I'm live painting, if I'm asked to do a gig at a church, like, sometimes I don't feel like I have to finish the art,
mm,
because I understand that, the connections that I make with, the public, or whoever the concert goers, or,
right.
conference goers, just to speak a little about the piece itself,
Right.
and see how it resonates with others. So there's always that element of speaking the language of the public.
Mm,
It's like, and we get so caught up in Christian art all the time. It's like
mm,
we're not really finding those little bridges that really connects our faith to what they're going through. So it's like there's a lot of this cognitive things that goes on outside of just creating, because I feel like if you're just creating for the creating sake, there's really no true purpose. It's like you're really, when you're designing, like I said, I'm a designer first, so it's like when you're designing, this is what I truly feel. I feel like God was a designer first, because he created everything for us.
That's right.
Before he put human on earth, like he created everything for us to be sustained. Because just imagine if he just put earth and there's like no resources. It's like, that's not very good design,
That's smart. Hey, preach, man. That's
yeah, good. So like I try to think the same way. It's like, I think, design is purpose, basically. You're putting purpose into the stuff that you make. So I think that really separates, an artist, who just paints, as opposed to an artist who paints with purpose.
Right. That's beautiful. Yeah. And so I want to switch gears a little bit. And you talked about COVID a little bit. When COVID happened, everything kind of changed for you. How did you feel when COVID hit, or what were you going through, especially with all the things that are going on, especially in a minority community like that? And because how attached COVID can be to the Asian community, and maybe in a negative way.
Right.
Were you, how did you process all that in the midst of like you have a physical pandemic going on, and then underneath that, or on top of that, you have this racial pandemic, I want to call it that, going on. So what was your experience during COVID, or the start of it?
Yeah, that's a tough conversation, just because we know where it came from, like I can't really say exactly, but people are saying, yeah. And I think that how it's being perpetuated, especially by our authorities, our president, calling it a Chinese virus, and I think that added more fuel to what happened. But of course, we were all freaking out, right? We were all running for toilet paper.
Yeah.
We were all hoarding, and
And now there's a gang of them.
My God,
they're on sale.
Right, exactly. 2 for 1,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, we got like tons of top ramen in the back,
that's right.
That was the first initial reaction, because we obviously didn't prepare for it, and I think our country was late in thinking that it was gonna just pass or something, or was it gonna hit us as hard as it did. But it was very rapid. I think as soon as it landed in, like you heard instances in, like, obviously New York and Washington, and that's what's freaky, is like those are our only 2 places that have family members, like New York and Washington.
Wow.
So for me, I was freaking out. I was just like, I was scared. I fed into all the stuff that the media and like the public was saying, and it wasn't as, it is a severe thing. Obviously, lots of people died, but I think it was, for me personally, it was very definitely over the top. Like I was just freaking out. I didn't think that because of ties, because of perpetuation of our president and the people were saying, where he came from, and saying this is a Chinese virus, it really fed into people, I think, disliking Asians more, and a lot of the xenophobia had really scared them. Or I'm not even sure, because it seems, even now, like I've been watching videos of how the truth of the expression of the Americans, how they treat Asians, and it's scary, to see someone being punched in the face, for no reason, or getting beat up because they're Asian. And it kind of brings me back to my childhood, like I grew up in Compton, and I remember, I would get beat up and bullied because I was the only Asian in my class. And it just seems like this thing just kind of went full circle. But the truth of, where this hate stems from, saying that I've been treated like this as a kid, and to see adults act like this now, it shows you that, racism is definitely generational, like those same feelings that I felt now, and the same kind of frustrations that I have, how others treat, like those who are Asian, is very difficult to see because it brings me trauma. It really does. It brings me back to a place where I didn't want to go back to.
Hmm.
So just learning how to cope with that, was really difficult. And now that things have been a little bit more alleviated, it's just finding ways where we can educate people. Like, hey,
Right.
like,
We're not
yeah,
all the same.
exactly.
We don't all speak the same language. No, I can't.
Right, and
Yeah.
and that's something that I've always leaned in towards. I feel like everything that I've done from the beginning of my life had been a cause of some kind of racial activity. Even
Mm,
graffiti art, it was the same thing. It's the fact that I wasn't even accepted as a person, so I have to find a culture that accepts me for what I can contribute. And I think that's how the
wow.
world should see each other. It's like, what can we offer
Right.
uh, that really makes your life better,
Right. Wow.
and graffiti arts, like, we never, I had black, Hispanic, Latinos, like, you name it, like, graffiti art was just, like no one really saw each other for who they were but what
Right.
they make. And it's all about street cred. Like, you had to show yourself off, so
Yeah.
you can be accepted. And it brought that level of competition. And I feel like, competition is not a bad thing. I think it really
Mm,
pushes people,
mm,
to be where they're at. And I think there needs to be a level of competition and a level of a love of acceptance and compassion that goes into play with the arts. But the way it's contributing to our community, yeah, yeah, I think because where I live in Long Beach, it's been more accepted that arts. Um, the mayor has, created these spaces for artists to express,
mm.
especially in downtown area. Um, I don't think there's ever a time, before, like, maybe 10 years ago, that you would see all the murals up, and now they create, like, these festivals like powwow, and like these events where people can come
Mhm.
together and make art. So it's cool how the arts has helped beautify the community, and how it brings people together, and it gives you a sense of peace too. Like, you don't feel like you're in a
Yeah.
more, it feels urban, but it's not like it's also gentrified too.
Right.
And I
Right.
see
Right.
a little
Yeah.
kind
That's
of
a
like,
whole nother thing. Yeah.
yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Like,
Yeah.
so there's pros and cons, obviously, of like, when you have cities asking you to create art, because there's also other intentions as well.
That's
you
right.
know
That's right.
uh, but yeah,
Yeah.
the
That's good.
city definitely cater more to the art instead of just using them for the arts.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
I
Right.
think there's that like, there's that feeling that you're taken care of.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said that and what you went through as a child. I think a lot of people in the minority community can relate to, right?
Hmm.
And so, but what you said, like you hid behind, and I'm not saying it's a negative thing, but just the reality of you're choosing something that you can that you're good at, obviously you have gift for, but also using it to kind of mask who you are.
Hmm.
And so, and it's crazy because Asian Americans, we've been so good at that, right? We've been so good at hiding behind schools, hiding behind grades, hiding behind success, and hiding behind titles. And so we're historically and traditionally we're not comfortable in bringing the front, right? And that's due to our culture, due to our the way we view the world, and if I can say back home, right, or back in our parents or ancestors' native land, where they're so communal, right? We live in a very communal society where it's not about the one, it's about the collective as one, right? And so, which is also very biblical in a sense, right? They might not even know Jesus at that time, but it is biblical, as we are the body, right? The Bible refers to the people as the body, and it doesn't say like a white body or a black body. No, it's the body of Christ, right? And
Yes.
so we're good at that. And so in a time where social media and everybody's being filmed, and so when we see something like that as Asians, obviously it triggers us in a way that we might not know how to react, right?
Mhm.
Because if you can see other minority communities, and I want to go into that next,
Right.
when we see injustice, when we see things that are going on, they know how to. Oh, I don't want to say they, but they know how to react, right? Some other communities know how to react in a way where they want to fight, they want to protest. But as Asian Americans, when we see that, we're like, what do we do, right? Do we react? Do we stay more silent, or do we
Right.
work harder? What are we supposed to do? So we're living in a time where I think a lot of things are bringing out, and there are Asian people with that extroverted and that purpose driven characteristic where, like, yes, now is a time where we got to speak up, which is awesome. And I see a lot of that going on, especially in these times of racial tension. And so if we can go into that a little bit,
Yeah.
so we got first world pandemic,
Mhm.
physical pandemic, and now we got this racial pandemic going on,
Right.
right? And so as an Asian American, and I'm praying for my black brothers and sisters in that community, because I got a lot of homies. I
Yes.
grew up in LA too, so I got a lot of homies in
Mhm.
South Central and all those guys and people, especially in the black church, that I'm talking to every single day and praying together and talking and having a conversation, because in reality, and I just want to say this with all humility, in reality, the black and Asian community weren't the best of friends. You know what I mean? And so, and so historically, I don't know. I think you're a little bit younger. I don't know. Maybe remember the '92 riots. So when the
Yeah.
'92 riots happened, especially as a Korean American, the Korean American community and the African American community, we were not tight at that point, right?
Right.
It
Mhm.
kind of segregated us more, and now we see the next generation coming together. But then the older generation, we're still like, man, this is the same thing that happened back then. What's going to change, right? And so when we see these type of things in the streets in this conversation, as now an Asian community living in this next generation, this next season of culture life, what is your experiences? Or so how did you, especially in Long Beach, where there was a lot of things that are going on in there, how did you navigate through all that? Being Asian American, standing next to our black brothers and sisters in that community, what was your experiences like?
Yeah, I mean, you're always taught to shut up, basically, right? Just to put it plain and simple,
Yep.
anything that happens to you, whether you got hurt or someone said something to you, you just gotta shut up, basically, and that's what your parents taught you. Um, and that's where the complicity starts. I think it really starts to the fact that your community is so small that you can't really make a difference in terms of your voice that you speak out to the
Right.
public. So just imagine, you already have a late group of refugees coming to America with
Right.
no money, with no food, and like there's no support, not a whole lot of support from the government. So it's like they throw you into these places, these ghettos, and you basically have to survive.
Right. And the
So
community that you're talking about, you're identifying was the Cambodian community,
Cambodian,
right?
yes,
That's your
yes,
Cambodian American, right?
yeah. So now it's like you have this group that, not the fact that, on top of the fact that, they've been, isolated from, their other families. These are refugees with nothing, but they also bring their PTSD from war as well too.
That's
So there's
right.
so many levels of trauma that happens, and then you're getting bullied by the community. It's like so many things are happening that people don't really understand, and
Mhm.
we got to figure out how to navigate life. So
Still go to work the next day, right?
right, yeah. So gotta go to work the next day. So it's like now you got parents who are PTSD, and then like I have remnants of secondhand PTSD, to be
Mm,
honest. And I didn't really find out until like maybe a year ago that that stuff actually really existed.
mm,
You find yourself doing things, abnormal things, like because these little triggers of maybe it was like something from your parents had told you you're not enough, or the fact that even like these racial things that you heard as a kid. I remember I had confronted somebody at the store because I heard the parents' child had said something racial to me,
mm.
and it escalated to something something that I couldn't even handle. And I was like, why is anybody not doing anything? There was like a couple who backed me up, and then it was like at a Costco, and like public relations was trying to de-escalate it. It's like people aren't really reacting, but I think with this generation, because our parents are still you know, scared,
Right.
of other races. It's like their racism, they are racist. Like just the way they
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah.
Not saying all of them are, but like
Yeah.
my parents, they have reminiscences of it. It's
Right.
like those things start to get imposed to you. So it's like you got to really put yourself in a different community and really
Mm,
understand the humanity of each person and seeing them the way that God sees them. So
that's good.
that's what helped me really understand the community, is that to bring more hope as to bring less hate into my mental state,
Hmm.
changing my lenses, every time I walk out of the house, and really seeing each person as a child of God, you know. So I think, in Cambodia town, which is like right off Anaheim Street in Long Beach,
That's right.
uh, there's a lot of, you can see there's a lot of hate, because they're going through so much. It's like they get so much pressure,
Mm,
everywhere they go. And not to say that, like, I don't want to blame them. There's just, like, there's just so much going on. But it's really cool that watching these videos of these owners who's, it's unfortunate, but it's cool the fact that they understood these break-ins, these lootings didn't come from, these other races in the
mm,
community. And they're like, yeah, these people weren't from Long Beach. They understood that, and I think with that being recognized, that really shows the resilience and the greater understanding of, how we're evolving as a community as well. So there's a sense of love there, as and the reaction of, you know uh us coming together, because our community isn't really tight. But I think as soon as it hit, like, you saw the communities and organizations coming together, boarding up people's homes. And like, I had contributed to one of the storefronts that needed to be painted, and I wrote, I think it was "Spread Love, Not Hate," and that was kind of like
mm.
my message for this whole season, because it really accompanies for the both, COVID situation,
Right.
and also the whole riot and all that stuff
Right.
that's
Right.
going on
Right.
right now. But with our new generation, like the millennials, they're really stepping up and making a voice. And like I said, I think it's also the contribution to the xenophobia that's going on, like
Mm,
mostly in like North Cali, at the
mhm.
Hayward and San Francisco area, that a lot of Asians are understanding that we need to kind of stand up for each other. And the only way we can actually do that is actually if we, work with other people outside of our race.
That's
So
right.
seeing the Asian for Black Lives Matter, which was really cool. I'm like, yeah, that's go Asians. But and I think another thing too, it's like, Cameroons are a little bit different, because the fact that a lot of them did grow up in a Black community, they
Hmm.
assimilated. So I don't think a lot of people understand that. Like,
Hmm.
it's so weird when you have Cambodians, using the N word, and I don't agree with it. It's
Right.
just like, it's just natural for them, because when
Hmm.
you lose a culture, you have to basically reset,
That's
and
right.
that's the culture that you know. So there's actually Cambodian Crips, and it's really strange. Like, I watched an interview where you see Cambodians in these, Black gangs, and I'm like, they're speaking the way
Right.
our Black community speaks.
Right.
So yeah, so I think there's a years of transformation. Like, I remember my cousins growing up in the '90s, like, they would have like the whole chola aesthetics. I'm like, yeah, well, y'all know what you're doing. Like, it was just so funny. It was
Right.
really funny. But like, that's what happens when you have your culture stripped. It's like you gotta find yourself again.
Mm,
And I think the only way that we can really truly find ourselves is really understanding who we are and our identity, in God. Um, and I've gone through a lot of phases in my life as well too. And like I said, I feel like my creativity had propelled me to really understand myself more throughout the years.
that's good. Yeah, it's so interesting what you said about, like, we're trying to find community, because that's just speaks into how humans are, right? We want to be with people. I think even though in a very technological state, I thought like, man, like seeing people is done. It reminds me of the movie Wall-E. Have you watched Wall-E before, where everybody's on the ship and they don't talk to each other?
Yeah,
But basically, there's all on chairs and like talking to, and they're next to each other, but they're like on the phone, right?
yeah,
Talking to one another. So I thought like this is done. But after a while, you can see people are like, man, like I want to be with people. So we are made to be with one another. And so it's interesting to see that. And going back to what you said about like Asian community, yeah, even me growing up, growing up in a very Hispanic neighborhood.
hmm,
First, it was to survive, right? Like I did not want to get my butt kicked because I'm the only Korean in there. Um, but then the second thing is after you get over that, it's this sense of I belong, right? I belong, and it doesn't matter what race we're in, which also speaks into this idea of how God created us is to be with just the humanness of people, how God created us to be, His children. And if you know children, they don't care what color you are, right? They just kick it with anybody. Like my son, being in a multicultural church and multi-ethnic communities, he does not care if he's with blacks and Mexicans, Salvadorians and other types of Pacific Islanders. That's his brothers and sisters. He doesn't get a little tense when he's a lot of with Koreans because we're not around Koreans that much either. And so he's like, why do they all look like me, but they don't act like me? You know what I mean?
right. That's a very
Um,
interesting thing that you
yeah,
just said, because I know who was it, Pastor Lamont from Emmaus, like
that's right.
same thing with him. He was a pastor at Mariners, and his kids started questioning themselves because they didn't look like other kids.
Right.
So it's like you want to be somewhere where you can identify, and I think that's where the beauty of culture comes
Yeah,
along. It's like,
that's
man,
beautiful.
like God like created us with so much intention that He made
Mm,
us different colors because we're His art piece. It's like
right.
it's so crazy. I'm like, man, that's amazing. The fact that that we're different. It's like to see that beauty of people of different color come together and working together
That's
is
good.
it's awesome.
That's good. Yeah, and I just wanted to hit on the point what you said is when especially in the Asian community, people have to know, like I said before, like just because we look like each other, we are totally different cultures, right? Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, Cambodians, Laos,
Right.
and the other
Seriously.
Southeast. They forget, I mean, because and then we also have to be better at that stuff, right? Intercultural relationship. And because we're so sometimes segregated, separated due to our culture, we forget that first we are human race, right? We're humans, and so yes, I think we should continue to stand up, be allies, support, and stand next to injustice in any community. But let's also start with our neighbors, right? Let's just start with our cousins, because I know in the Asian community, we do have that type of culture of like silence, shame, neglect within even our own families, right? So we're not allowed to express our feelings. We're not allowed to express how we think. And so we got to continue to be better at that. And I know that our Asian communities are trying to be better at giving resources, especially in this generation that we're in. And there's wonderful people like you, man, continuing to bridge those gaps. And it's awesome. What are some of your thoughts on how maybe the next generation of Asian American can continue to, be uh, um, be productive in bridging and all those things, right? Because the last generation is hard because they can't even speak English. But
Right.
now, a couple generations later, you got my generation that grew up in the '90s. Now we got this generation that grew up in the 2000s and going on. How can Asian Americans continue to continue to be part of society where we're actually not just being productive financially, right, but
Right.
also being productive socially and communally? What do you think?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of heart things that needs to be worked on first.
Mm,
And you obviously can't really notice these things until someone really points it out.
that's good.
So a lot of mentorship. Just working on who you are and understanding yourself as a person. Because with the Cambodian community, it's like their parents have discouraged them. Throughout
Mm,
their whole lives. It's like now we have to go back to just learning how to love again. It's like how to be affectionate. Like believers. Like I remember, for us, maybe it's the same thing for you as well. Like I'm sure, like your parents didn't really tell you I love you, or like
yeah.
or really told you or hugged you or held your hand or whatever. And I think it goes back to just, the basics and the foundations of just what love means in our families,
Mm.
So, affirmation, but good affirmation, like,
Mm.
letting them know, the bad affirmations, obviously the affirmation you get from social media. It's like you get fed into all this stuff so you can actually promote yourself. But, like healthy affirmations, definitely, just making assurance, it's that
Right.
very nurturing kind of affirmation where you feel like, you feel like, you feel comfortable, you feel encouraged, sometimes you feel like you can take over the world, and
Mm.
that's what affirmation is. That's the power of affirmation, um, yeah, I think when you get discouraged so much, it's like you don't feel like you can really propel yourself to like the true identity and the true calling that God has for you.
Mm.
So it's this affirmation calling, and then trusting your neighbors, trusting your own family member, like really breaking those bonds of trying to keep things for yourself. Because I think with Asian, the model minority, right? Like
Right.
what people will think about Asians is that you work hard, you get to where you're at, right? And I think that's something that we need to break, because it's a lot of selfishness, really.
Mm.
It's like you're doing everything for yourself,
Right.
but now, like I said, like seeing these millennials and seeing these younger generations serving the community, and
Mm.
I think that's where my heart gets broken, when I start to give more of myself to these organizations, and because you get to see more about what goes on, and at the same time, unintentionally, it's like you're working with people outside of your community as well. So I think there's that level of just serving, just as much as like even a person who serves at church, it really does and changes who you are, and giving your time.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good, Richie. Well, thanks a lot for continuing to have these types of
Yeah, you're
conversations.
welcome.
It's not easy, and yeah, so I can't wait to see what you create
Yeah.
for so we can give somebody with that. Where can we? So where can we find you? What are you doing next? What's going on in the world of art, and how can we continue to support
Mm,
that?
that's good. Yeah, in the world of arts, like I said, a lot of my gigs did get canceled. I'm still hoping that Coachella is happening, but that didn't happen. It's really hard. Like I said, I've readjusted a lot of my stuff,
Right.
catering to more serving and catering to the needs of the world. Like obviously right now, it's like people are cooped up in their homes, so it's like
Mhm.
I'm creating art classes.
That's
Our
good.
organization is called The Mix. You can find us at Facebook / join the mix. So
Mhm.
if you guys want, or if your kids want free art lessons, tune in at 7 o'clock every Wednesday night.
Mm.
So I'm also doing personal art classes too. Hopefully, starting out even more so. What else am I doing? What else we got going on? We have the mix. Oh, I think another thing too, like I said, being a designer, like listening to what people need right now and finding ways to connect. I'm trying to dive into video games more, which is not really
Mhm.
my forte, but like I said, there's a need for that.
That's
I'm not
right.
sure
There
if
is.
everyone knows Facebook had created an app for gaming. Like
Oh,
Facebook has been like a hub for gaming, which is really interesting how that just kind of
interesting. Yeah.
changed, like over the last few months, because they see that there's a need for that too. So like I said, I'm just listening, really, like listening and seeing, you know, where I can fit myself into, so that's kind of like those main areas right now. I'm hoping, let's see what else.
Where
Uh,
can they find you on Instagram?
they can find me at Chi Create,
Mhm.
CHI Create. And you can find me on my personal Facebook page, which is
Mhm.
Facebook / Chi Create. Same thing.
Okay, cool. Hey, thanks a lot for talking and taking this time for this wonderful conversation, man.
Yeah.
And may God bless you to continue to be that bridge through art. I see your stuff. Your stuff is awesome.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to get out of this thing so we can kick it together.
For real, man.
Maybe go get some Cambodian food in Cambodia
Do
town.
it. Open noodles. We can go
Yeah,
rice
that,
strings.
that's right.
Like
That's
corn
right.
potatoes.
Let's
Correct
attack
me
it.
sure.
Let's
Yeah.
attack it. All
Yeah.
right, brother. Well, thanks a lot, and thank you guys for tuning in again for another time of Coffee Call. Hey, Richie, God bless, and God bless everybody else. Thanks, brother.
See you guys.
See ya.